for the Christian, the Orthodox Christian experience. Mm-hmm. It's by the, by the work, by the keeping, by the external keeping of the feasts and fasts, and no flesh will be justified either.
Right. That's right.
It's like, John the Baptist, you say Abraham's my father, God can raise up children to Abraham from these stones, it's like, it's not, there's the reality behind the.
And I think a lot of that stuff is there, like fasts are there. I think fasts are there for our education. I mean, they're there not to like be an end unto themselves, but to help bring us into conformance. But
it's, Paul uses kind of the athletic metaphor, multiple times. That it's like there's a doesn't make you a more righteous person to be athletically disciplined, but if your goal is to compete effectively, then you embrace that. That whole discipline of learning to say no to yourself is really it's a good thing. It's a good thing to have to be able to, I guess, to really kind of more animal sort of level desires, and you just have to say, not today.
Not today. Later. Not today. Yeah.
Maybe in 6 weeks.
When they talk about ascetic practices, like we talk about fasting, and vigils is often part of that list. And what exactly? And that's in monasteries primarily. That means what practically?
Well, I think it's two things. One is there's a service of a vigil that I think it's like kind of like Vespers on steroids. I think it can go 4 or 5 hours, and so I think that's one aspect of it. But I think they also, when they talk about kind of individual vigil, I think that what they're talking about is being in their cell, pray, and there's probably some other things attached to it. I mean, they may be reciting psalms. They may be.
But these are all night kind of.
They are. Yeah, I think so. Pretty much. Yeah.
And sometimes it's done individually, and sometimes it's done in the church.
I think in monasteries it's going to be done in churches, but if you're kind of living on your own, then I think you'll do it by yourself. Yeah. Although, they all, even in monasteries, they'll have a prayer rule, they'll have a cell rule that they're supposed to do certain prayers, they're supposed to probably read certain psalms, they are probably supposed to do so many prostrations and that kind of thing. That's a hard life, It really is. I mean, it's an attractive life, but a hard life.
Very different life.
Yeah.
And like when you read, like I've been reading some things about St. Porphyrios and so when he talks about his time on Mount Athos, and he was so enthusiastic. I mean, he was so joyful in it, and
yeah. Well, and everybody, I'm sure not everybody, but it seems like everybody that you run into or that you read something, like Father Maximus, was on Mount Athos for a good while. And it's like, these people look back on it like, those were like the best days of my life. It was just wonderful.
As hard as it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was distractions. I think of, how the things that they were able to do, and like for Porphyrios, he just did whatever his elders And that was the only thing he was concerned about, is pleasing his elders. And we live in such a different place where there are so many things to try to balance, and we've got to make so many decisions, and it seems simpler, not easy, but simpler, certainly more focused.
Yeah. You know, that really is true. I mean, you're right. I mean, a lot of those people, whatever their elder says is the law, and that's what they do. You know, even St. Simon of Mount Athos, when he first went to Mount Athos, he ended up with an elder who was not only, I mean, he was cruel. I mean, he was physically abusive towards Simon. And people were saying, you need to leave him. And Simon is like, no, I can't leave him. It's my elder. And stayed with him until he died, and then buried him. And then went up and decayed. But you know, I think there's this big tradition that obedience is what makes a monk or nun. You know, that is an essential part of training, kind of, I guess.
But we've heard about like that, his elder, but there have been other times we've heard about, I can't remember, somebody else, I think we read about him, not in silence, you know, somebody had an elder who, I don't know who it was, but who was very difficult.
Yeah.
And maybe a little psychologically damaged.
Yeah.
And you wonder, how did they get into that position of authority?
Where somebody would put somebody else under their authority. You know?
Yeah, and I don't know.
Because a lot of the counsel, you hear is like, be very careful who you choose as an elder. You know, this is not something because of, you know, and so you want to really know this person. This is somebody you can trust your soul to.
Yeah, I mean it's and then the far end of that would be an elder that is just lackadaisical. You know, do whatever you want to do.
And you know, like somebody who is apprenticed for some skill, trade, craft, artistic, a coach, you know, athletic. I mean, if you're serious about the activity, learning the activity, you want somebody who's going to, you know, push you to, you know. So it's like, if you want an elder who's lax, then that's all you want. I mean, you're not really interested in it.
I just want a place to stay.
Porphyrios and Paisio, they seem kind of similar in many ways. A lot of temperament and kind of their gifting, the way they engage people. There's a certain lightness and brightness about them. The Russians tend to be a little darker, a little more austere. I mean, they're both austere, but in very different ways. Temperamentally, it's really interesting to read.
Yeah, it is.
It's like kind of just a national temperament that seems to.
And, you know, that could be that Slavic thing. I mean, I'm not a Slav, so it's easy for me to say, but I think the national personality of Slavs is
a little darker, a little more intense, a little more melancholy, kind of introspective. I don't know, but you know, it is interesting sometimes to read about. You know, I mean, and there's a desert fathers, know about them, but then kind of that next wave of monasteries, especially like in Western Europe and the British Isles. You know, the way that those developed, and that's before they were Catholic per se. They were, you know, John Cassian went to Europe and started the trend, and it was a real different kind of. I mean, it was clearly monastic, but they had their own kind of culture. Certainly Celtic, very, very, very nature enmeshed consciousness. You see that, you know, they just are on a different level of, you know, you see it in all the Desert Fathers in many ways, but the Celts seem to have, again, a national temperament, a national history of that appreciation, awareness of the logoi in all of creation.
Yeah.
We, I don't know, your time is, you gotta be careful how you spend your time. There's a very interesting interview on, you get on YouTube.
Uh-huh.
A guy named Martin Shaw, who is well-known, he's British. And he's a well-known storyteller. He's had a school for 20 years, training. They're telling, the old myths and stories. You had, it's kind of this interview between two individuals. One was kind of an Anglican. He actually became a priest and then became disillusioned. And Martin Shaw grew up kind of in the evangelical kind of, and they both kind of left Christianity. And they're both kind of making their way back for various reasons. The interviewer, kind of the influence of Owen Barfield and C.S. Lewis, and kind of inkling kind of crowd.
Yeah.
He's Martin Shaw, he didn't get into paganism per se, but he lived in a tent for like 4 years and very connected with the earth and part of the storytelling. It's a real down-to-earth guy. I really enjoyed listening to him. But he did 100-day discipline, and I don't know, because part of what he does is kind of these different rituals, and I don't really understand kind of what the framing it was, but all it was every night to go out into the woods, and the goal was just giving thanks, just being grateful for life.
Yeah.
And he chose 100 days because he just knew the way these discipline kind of things work is that if you don't set a time frame, when he gets old, you just say, I'm done.
Yeah.
I feel led to be done.
Yeah.
And so he put 100 days on it, and it got long, and then but on the last night he did an all-night vigil, and he had a very mystical experience.
Yeah.
Very mystical experience. And he said that, doesn't try to explain it, but it just, he describes it in terms of kind of like an aurora borealis, this kind of thing coming like right down into the woods, like 10 feet away. It was like, and he said, I've been out in the woods long enough to be able to say, there's probably there could be a totally natural explanation. I would say, that makes sense. Yeah. Except that, in a ritual setting like that, where his purpose, I'm trying to listen, and he believed in God or, some sort of higher power, it's like, and he had the sense that he was searching for something. Yeah. That was the whole point of this, to listen. And so when something like that happens in that kind of context at that moment, he's like, man, you take it seriously. So he started visiting these different churches, and he said, Catholic Church, Baptist Church, different churches. He says everybody was very kind, and I didn't have any bad experiences.
Yeah.
But he had gone to an Orthodox service 2 days before the interview.
Yeah.
And it just blew him away. I mean, it was kind of like, here you have this kind of mythologist who's lived his adult life.
Yeah.
And he said it was like every 15 minutes, it's like doors opening deeper and deeper and deeper. It was really fascinating. It was like, I left church and I blew a red light and people were yelling at me and shouting at me. He said, I rolled down the window. I said, I've just been to church. I don't know what happened to me, and drove away. And anyway, the whole interview was a fascinating interview. So it's like, it was just 2 days before the interview. It's not like he became Orthodox, but it's like he had an experience that was so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And that he's going to continue to explore Orthodox, because a good friend of his, a guy named Paul Kingsnorth, who entered the Orthodox Church about 1.5 years ago, a writer, another British guy, writer, very interesting. You would find him a fascinating person too, in terms of very articulate, very thoughtful, very humble. So I'm sure that Paul Kingsnorth's journey was kind of influential on Martin Schultz. Interesting guys, and you just see, Orthodoxy. I mean, it seems like a miracle that any Protestant becomes Orthodox, but
it is actually. I think. I mean, here we are.
Here we are. And it's gratefully it happened. Yeah, it's about time to shift gears. Out there.
Oh, really?
They all look a little bit, but one close to the church.
Oh, really?